Hello, I'm Ann Gritch, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this segment of our series on the cultural and ethnic groups in the Diocese of San Jose. Because of COVID-19, we are interviewing and videotaping outside. We're right now at St. William Parish in Los Altos, and with me is Maria Teodorczyk, Maria Teodorczyk, who is from the St. Brother Albert Polish community in San Jose. So Maria, welcome. It's good to have you here.
Thank you, Anne.
All right.
Thank you.
So tell me a little bit about St. Brother Albert, about the parish. It got started a while before the actual building. Church parish right now is what, 1998? Is that when it was
finished construction?
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I believe in the beginning of 1980s, the land where our mission is now was purchased with the help of parishioners and Society of Christ. And until 1996, we just gathered at different locations thanks to hospitality of different groups and churches. First, it was as I joined the Bay Area in 1988, I first participated in Mass in Palo Alto on El Camino Catholic community. And later on, I learned from my Croatian friend, hey, there is a Polish community and they gather for Mass in Polish. And then it was in St. Bishop Mitty High School. And that's where I joined. I believe it was 1990 or 1991. And after a few years, we were asked to leave that place, and we moved to St. Cyprian in Sunnyvale, where we held masses in their gym hall.
Yes.
And in 1996, Father Paweł Bandurski came as our proboszcz, which we call a priest, in charge. And he started with the obviously parishioners to collect funds for building a new and constructing a new church at that place that we already own. And after 2 years, in April of 1998, the parish building was consecrated. And since then, we've been there very happy to have our own place.
Absolutely, I can imagine. Now, the parish is staffed by the Society of Christ, priests of the Society of Christ, is that right?
That is correct.
And I think, are their headquarters in Chicago, in this country?
Lombard, near Chicago, yes.
Yeah, so.
And that's the province of North America, which consists of United States and Canada.
Okay. And so that's where the priests come from. Good.
Correct.
Okay.
And they change, every 6 to 9 to
That
whatever.
happens in every parish, right? The people stay, but the pastors come and go.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So it's St. Brother Albert. Tell me about the patron. How did the name get chosen?
I'm not sure about that. It's probably started earlier before I came to the States and to join the parishioners. But it's been a very well-known saint of Poland. He basically was born to a noble family, and in 1845. He at that time, when he was born, Poland was divided and occupied by Russia, Prussia, and Austria. And in 1863, there was an uprising in Poland against Russia, and 17 years old Albert Chmielowski joined the rebels and fought against Russia. And he was wounded and lost leg. And after that, he decided, because he would be prosecuted, to avoid that, he moved to Paris. And he wanted to become a painter. So he took study there, school there, and stayed in outside of the non-existent Poland. He left behind about 100 pieces of artwork, watercolors, oil paintings, and drawings.
Wow.
And while he was working on the painting of Ecce Homo, which presented Christ in a crown of thorn right before crucifixion, he got, I would say, a calling that he wanted to become a priest. And at the age of 35, he entered the monastery and began to help homeless, poor alcoholics. And he started to create shelters for those people without the roof over their head in Kraków, Zakopane, and Lwów. And in 1989, Pope John Paul II made Albert Chmielowski a saint. In 2007, known Polish director Krzysztof Zanussi also made a film about him titled Our God's Brother. So that's the story of our saint. If you go to Zakopane, there are something that's called Hermitage, like a place kind of in an area of woods in the mountains, where he lived and prayed there. And the stone from that part of Tatra Mountains was brought, and I think John Paul II, the Pope, blessed it, and it's built in our frontal port of our
wonderful.
church.
Oh, that's lovely. That is grand. So it's quite a rich history.
Yes.
How large a community do you have?
You know,
several masses in Polish and in English.
I'm not exactly sure how many people are signed up, but I think it's about 200 families.
Okay.
Maybe 300. Not everyone is still living in that area. Some people moved out.
Sure.
But we have 3 masses in Polish. That is Saturday evening, and 3 on Sunday. However, one of them at 9 in the morning is in English. So altogether we have 4 masses every day in the morning. Our pastor also serves the mass.
Outside now.
Now outside, yes.
Yeah. Which is fine until the weather gets cold.
Right.
Yes. Tell me a little bit about the life of the community, about your devotions. Let's start with the devotions.
You know, Christianity in Poland started in 966, so it's over 1,000 years. And it started in 2 cities, in Gniezno and Poznań. And the first bishop, he was named by Pope John XIII in 1968. And 93% of Poles would link themselves to Catholicism, although much, less of them participate every Sunday in the Mass. But we have, Polish Church has been through ages and a time of very hardship, very important for Polish people. You probably may know that in 1683, Polish King Sobieski kept Turks from coming with their big herds of soldiers to take over the Catholic places in Europe, and Sobieski stopped them near Vienna. And in 1920, on the other hand, we have something that we called miracle near Vistula River, Cud nad Wisłą, where a Polish army stopped the Soviets, who invaded very young, newly born in 1918 Poland, and wanted to pass the communism to this part of Europe. So with the history throughout the years, we've been wiped out from the map of Europe for 123 years. We kept the language, we kept poetry, we kept arts, all that thanks to a lot of Polish patriots and many of them priests, pastors.
And a lot of determination, though, I would think. Families and parents teaching their children.
Correct. Up to these days, although although it's a little more difficult, to have a young generation keep the language. We have a little Polish school that gathers every other week at our church at the premises. We have a separate building where kids study Polish history, Polish language. Obviously, they learn religion as well. So.
Now, do most of the children have Polish at home? Would they be listening to, would their parents be speaking to them in Polish?
It depends.
Sure.
It depends. I know families where one of the parents is Polish and they keep the language very much alive. I know families that both are Polish and the kids don't speak Polish.
Yeah.
And I know, those that keep the language very alive. My own daughter, when I moved to Bay Area and she joined me, she was at the time a junior at high school, and I asked her, let's speak English. And she says, what about my Polish?
Good for her.
I don't want to speak English at home, so she kept the language.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Because I think that is, in fact, I've heard all of the cultural communities have that issue of keeping the language alive with the next generation because they're surrounded by English.
Right. My grandchildren, granddaughter speaks much better, has better ear for languages.
Oh, good.
And she answers in Polish. But my grandson, I speak to him in Polish, he answers in English. He understands what I'm saying, but...
Oh. So what are some of the customs that have grown out of this history?
I think the most beautiful, I would call, and traditional is the Christmas Eve day, which we call Vigilia. This is a years of tradition where, in Poland, people get prepared to that evening to the child being born on the 25th or at the night through the month of December, when we have special masses called rorati in the morning. Usually, I remember at dark, at 6:30 in the morning, we had those masses in the church. We'll come with lit candles, and we got prepared to the Christ being born. I doubted that we have that, or in Poland, yes, they still do. But we usually have some retreats before in the church where the priest invited either from Poland or from other parishes in US comes, and for 3 days, 4 days we have mass and a sermon, and going back to
like a missional.
Yes, yeah. So that's very nice tradition. On the eve of Christmas Eve, which they called Vigilia, we try to fast during that day, so that kind of symbolizes the poor and the hardship of Holy Family. They went through. And at the time where the first star shows on the sky, we call them pierwsza gwiazdka, the traditional supper starts. All the close family gathers around the table. We have a tablecloth, white tablecloth. Some people put a hay underneath that tablecloth to symbolize that Christ was born in the manger. And the very important part is that we start with a prayer, and then we have a wafer that we usually get from the church. It's blessed, and it's kind of like a communion wafer. And usually the father of the family takes that wafer, breaks it into pieces, and handles to every person participating in that supper. And we start with going around and exchanging good wishes of health and
Lovely.
love. And it's important that on that day there is no quarrels, no arguments.
All right.
The kids behave, because it's like a prediction for next year.
Ah,
So if there were some misunderstanding, we need to apologize before we go to the ceremony of breaking the opłatek, that wafer. After that, we have a quite big supper. Typically and traditionally, it would enlist like 12 dishes to symbolize 12 apostles. The other part that is important, usually at every table, there would be one empty plate, empty covering, which would be for unexpected guests. Kind of, if a poor comes, we would invite, and if we know that someone is alone, we would invite to a supper. But in addition to that, there is always one empty plate on the table for
Great
that
symbol.
unexpected guest. Typical food there would be as a soup, depends on the parts of Poland. Some would have a red borscht. Some would have mushroom soup with noodles. At my family, we always have a mushrooms, which are dried mushrooms, so they usually come from Poland. You know, this opłatek is also very, very interesting things, because people sent from Poland up to these days to our family, different relatives send us that opłatek to share that love with us, even though they're many thousand miles away.
Yes.
So that's another part. Now, following that soup, the dinner is meatless. The protein comes from the fish, and we would have all kind of herrings, you know, different sauce, etc. We could have usually freshwater fish, and in Poland, the traditional fish is a carp. We don't like much the carp specifically. They just grow too big and they're not tasty. So we switched the tradition to the sea fish. Like we usually have salmon.
Traditions grow.
Yes. So we modify that, you know. And there must be pierogis, which are dumplings, usually with sauerkraut and mushrooms. There will be cabbage, two types of cabbage with small yellow peas and with mushrooms. And after that, we have some traditional Christmas cakes like poppy seed cake and cheesecake. You know, once that feast is over, we gather around the Christmas tree, sing carols, and the kids go unwrap the gifts. And in my family, after that, we always attend the midnight mass, which we called pasterka. So that's a beautiful tradition that I know from my childhood, and we
continue to celebrate.
Continue here as well. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Now, is Easter anything particularly special about Easter?
Yeah, the special thing of Easter is that we have food blessing. So each family would prepare a smaller or bigger basket with all kind of goodies. Eggs are number one, and sometimes there are decorated eggs. Kiełbasa, of course, sausage, ham, some pieces of cake, bread, salt and pepper, in my family. And we go to the church. This year we didn't.
No, a lot of things we didn't do this year.
We've got an instruction how each family could bless themselves the food because of the COVID. But usually we gather in the church, and there is from 11 to 3, every half an hour, different sessions. Kids with parents come. Obviously there is a tomb of Christ there, so has to be quiet and has to be remember where we are. But yeah, that's a nice tradition. And my family, we go to the Resurrection Mass, which is first Mass in the morning, although usually there is a Triduum, starts at I think the dark sky where that Mass is quite long and lengthy. And then after that we have a breakfast. So the very big meal on Easter is having family around for breakfast. So we start with eggs, to celebrate the rebirth of life. Yeah.
The parish itself, are there particular activities, ministries?
There is a rosary group that I know of. We have lectors. I'm not sure if there is much more than that. Obviously once a year we used to have a Polish festival.
I know. Not this year, sadly.
Not this year, but it's quite a big day, and ladies in the kitchen prepare that for months.
Yes.
They make pierogis, they make gołąbki, which is stuffed cabbage, and all kind of bigos, traditional Polish food.
Right.
And people come from all over. They already know a little bit about us, our food. They celebrate that. We have some performances of the Polish dance groups as well. And it's a whole Sunday activity that takes place usually, not this year, of course.
Hopefully next year.
Hopefully, yes, yeah.
I was thinking too, do people come from all over the diocese? Your parish would not necessarily just be geographic, huh?
Correct. We have people coming from Concord, for example, and also coming from south, like Carmel or Monterey, from East Bay, Pleasanton, and Livermore, La Honda. So.
Are you the only Polish parish in the Bay Area?
In the Bay Area, no. We have a Polish parish in San Francisco. I'm not sure they have their own dedicated church. Maybe they share. I know there's a chapel somewhere in East Bay, there in Newark, probably. And I think up north there was also a chapel there, that people have Mass in Polish, could have Mass in Polish.
So the focus would very much be then on the whole religious aspect, because if you have people spread out all over, coming from all over, you're not going to have that many particular.
Exactly, and sometimes it's even difficult, with the traffic and all that. From these retreats that we have before, Christmas and before Easter, twice a year, that people can barely make it at 7:30 p.m. because of the traffic. If they're coming, from the north, going south, the traffic became, right now it's light, but usually it's a big issue.
Yeah, that's really so. What would be the challenges, would you say? And we've probably skirted some of them, talking about keeping the language alive, the traffic. What other kinds of challenges would you see that the parish has, or the Polish community has, maybe? Especially, right now we're all challenged just in terms of losing jobs and everything else.
Yeah, up to the moment we manage, from what I know, with all the finances, but it's getting thinner and thinner. So hopefully, thank God, it will end soon, that we can recover and have the full community showing up again. And I believe we'll do, God will help us.
I believe that
that's
too.
That's always, we probably worry too much in advance than it's really necessary. And again, I think keeping that tradition alive with young generation, making sure that they follow the tradition and the faith of their parents. Many of us were born outside of US. Many of us came here to this country, to a very open country, and we're blessed to be able to pray in our language and gather together and have all activities. But still, we would like that faith and tradition to keep alive.
Absolutely.
Pretty much.
Well, just the richness, it's your heritage.
Yes, the heritage is really beautiful and fantastic. The knowledge of our saints, and obviously number one is John Paul II.
And Saint Brother Albert.
And Saint Brother Albert, but the Pope specifically, because I lived to see him. He was in Bay Area in '87 in September.
Yes.
I came from Canada, and saw him passing with the Papamobile through Geary Boulevard. It was spectacular.
Oh, how fun.
I made several pictures, but on one of them, there is this Hispanic lady with a banner, and it's all the banner on my picture. Picture. But the other, I have the Pope already passed, and I have him standing in a Papamobile on the picture. So, but you know, this whole history of Poland, the latest 50 years, you know, after the communist and the movement started, basically the Pope was inspiration. He visited Poland in '79 in June. And I still remember when he was elected, you know. I remember that night I was working as an assistant professor at university in Łódź, and we left laboratories. My husband and I worked in the same university, and it was dark, 16th of October. You hear the bells tolling, and I said, well, they've elected a pope. Mm-hmm. We went home, we turned on the radio, and it was 8 p.m. And from the government communist system, they said, and the Pope was elected Karol Wojtyła. And that was it.
Wow.
There was no more word added, just this. And obviously we started tuning to Radio Free Europe and Voice of America, trying to learn. He was known as one of the, bishops in Krakow, but Cardinal Wyszyński was #1 Polish primate, and at that time it was a big surprise. He was 58 years old when he was elected, and it turned out that in '79 in June, first pilgrimage to Poland, you know, in the Piłsudski Square in Warsaw.
Oh, it made history.
Millions of people gathered, and he said, "Let your spirit descend on earth, on this land." And there was like ignition of the people action and emotion. That's, you know, when 1980 solidarity movement started, and 81, and the martial law and all that, you know, many people got killed. But eventually, slowly, we've get rid of that terrible system.
And you have your own country back.
Exactly, yeah.
Do you have family? Still in
right now, just cousins. My parents died a few years ago. My brother is in Bay Area, and our daughter lives in Berkeley.
Oh, how nice for you! And grandchildren too.
And 2 grandchildren. Yeah,
that's wonderful. Yeah, I would imagine that a number of the people then still have family in Poland, whether it's cousins or nieces.
Oh,
and nephews.
Yes, and they also have parents. You know, there's several younger parishioners, and they still have parents alive, and they travel, you know, once a year or as they can afford.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, the Polish community is a blessing to the Diocese of San Jose.
Thank you.
And we are so blessed in this diocese because we have such vibrant cultural communities.
Right.
You know, I love Bishop McGraw's image of the mosaic. And if one piece is missing, the picture is off. You know, and the Polish mosaic piece is a very important one. So, Maria, I thank you so much for being here. This was wonderful to talk with you.
Thank you so much, Anne. It was a pleasure to meet you, and Father Bob as well.
Great.